The CBDCs are progressing very rapidly, right? The Bank for International Settlements, the World Economic Forum say almost every government in the world, almost every central bank in the world is rolling these out. They need to understand this isn't money in the traditional sense. This is programmable ration cards, right, that are based on some combination of energy credits or carbon credits that you will be allowed to use for certain purposes based on, for example, your social credit score as they've pioneered in China. This isn't money like we think of it, like I can go to the store and buy whatever I feel like it as long as I have enough money. These are programmable currencies, and we have to get out of our mind the notion that this is money. They are engineering this polycrisis. Don't let them convince you that this is somehow organic. This was a huge focus in the Pact for the Future. I was actually at UN headquarters when they adopted this atrocious document, and a big part of it is what do we do during emergencies? And surprise, the UN Secretary General gets to declare emergencies, and he gets to have all power and authority during these declared emergencies.
Alien invasions, we have this UFO and UAP disclosure movement. I wanted to hear your thoughts. Is it a psyop? Is it like the Project Bluebeam kind of thing? Is it a demon disclosure?
I think everybody needs to spend some time thinking about this, regardless of where you're at. If you're an atheist, if you're an agnostic, if you're a Christian, if you're a Buddhist, if you're a Muslim, everybody needs to be spending some time thinking about this right now. And the Book of Revelation is a very important text.
My friends, you are way too dependent on grocery stores, and it's going to cost a lot of people a lot going forward when we see a 73-year shortage of cattle head. We are seeing the supply chain collapse across the board. Europe's farmer protests warn of America's risk of food supply collapse. Of course, we have experts saying, arm yourself, get prepared, stock up. New USDA report paints troubling picture for America's cattle industry. It's all by design, my friends, and if you are dependent on the grocery stores, which could go down and be out of food overnight, then we have a big problem. That's why we try to give a real solution here. Right now, you could save 25% if you use code WAM, W-A-M, over at heavensharvest.com. For long-term storable foods that are non-GMO, there's organic kits, heirloom seeds, water filtration and storage, and books on how to get started. There's freeze-dried food. This is for the future of yourself and your family, and it's imperative that everyone gets stocked up so you don't have to live with fear. You have peace of mind going forward. It's incredibly important, based on individual responsibility, for everyone out there to have food stocked up in their home for whatever comes your way, whether it be war, whether it be some kind of civil unrest, whether it be the collapse of the food supply in general, which we have been witnessing across the board with crazy mandates. Please check out heavensharvest.com, code WAM, W-A-M, biggest sale ever, 25% off. Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by Alex Newman of libertysentinel.org. I'm really excited to be talking with him. I haven't actually done an interview with him in, 9 years now, and it's about time we catch up. He's a co-author of the new book, Woke and Weaponized, How Karl Marx Won the Battle for American Education and How We Can Win It Back, which is available online. First of all, thank you for joining us.
It is so great to be here. Thank you so much. And Josh, I can't believe it's been 9 years. That is crazy, but great to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I remember talking with you at the Red Pill Expo years ago about the public school system and the green agenda and all that. And all this has really come to fruition because, with this book I was just mentioning, how Karl Marx won the battle for American education. Speaking of Karl Marx, one of the things I've been really focusing on, and I think is one of the most important rabbit holes people really need to go down, is what we're seeing with the digital IDs being rolled out across the board. And it's not just the UK, where we recently saw King Charles do a speech talking about the introduction of digital IDs, or where Keir Starmer has been pushing the mandates for digital IDs. It's happening across the board. We have Missouri pushing it for internet age verification. We have, of course, banks pushing it to prove citizenship and all this kind of stuff. A lot of people are using the mass migration issue, which is a very real issue, but then they're saying to stop this, we need biometrics, we need digital IDs, we need all this kind of stuff. And of course, with that, we also have data centers being constructed everywhere, including a 62 square mile one in Utah, which is absolutely crazy. Both the left and the right are creating pretexts to bring in digital IDs. So I wanted to ask you, how is the digital gulag being created currently, and how are both sides of the political spectrum bringing this agenda forward in their own ways? Because this is not just an issue of, the climate change leftists, and it's not just an issue of, the security state right wingers. It's an issue of both sides that seem to be all culminating right now.
It absolutely is, Josh. And so the globalists have gotten smart. They figured out that you have to use the right for some things, you have to use the left for some things. And so they're building this digital gulag in pieces. And they actually say this. If you go to the UN Development Program, which is one of the organizations at the United Abominations leading the charge here, they actually have a whole program called the 50 in 5. And the idea behind the 50 in 5 is that 50 different governments are each going to focus on one particular component of the digital gulag. They call it the digital public infrastructure that we need for the new age. And all these different governments will focus on different parts. You focus on digital IDs. We'll focus on digital currency. We'll focus on tokenization. We'll focus on the international blockchain ledger. Everybody focuses on their own little piece. And then at the end of the 5 years, all of these governments will come together. They'll look at best practices, what worked well, what didn't, what should we improve on, and then merge them all together. So that is already well underway. And different governments are focusing on their own little pieces. And they're having to adapt a little bit along the way. The outrage about central bank digital currencies got so loud in the United States that we had multiple states ban CBDCs, including my home state of Florida. I'm very grateful for our governor and our legislators for taking that very important step. We had President Trump, of course, do the executive order banning CBDCs. And so they said, well, we'll just improvise, right? We'll pass the Clarity Act, the Genius Act, and we'll just basically hijack the private cryptos and turn those into proto CBDCs and do the know your customer and all the rest. So they're bringing it in from all angles. One of the parts that I think is very important that hasn't received a lot of attention is the international architecture to make it all work. So I want to get to that, but you asked about the different components. Obviously, digital ID is well underway. More than half of the states in the United States are rolling it out. Anybody who's been to an airport lately, when you pass TSA, you've got the fast lane for the people with their little digital ID. So it's optional for now. And the UK, we all saw Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the communist, say it's going to be mandatory, but it's going to be free. So that'll be fun. We all saw the King Charles, say that it's coming, that his ministers are going to push it. And it's interesting because, as you pointed out, Josh, they're packaging this as a tool to deal with the mass immigration that, of course, they created. Right? They're the ones who opened the borders. They're the ones who encouraged all these people to come. They're the ones who blew up the countries that all these people are fleeing from. What could go wrong? But when they actually proposed this in 2010, because I've been covering this, Josh, almost my whole career in journalism. In 2010, I did an article for the New American Magazine about the first ever American proposal for a biometric national digital ID system. They were going to turn our Social Security cards into national biometric digital IDs that would be required to work. And they didn't use illegal immigration as the pretext. You know what they did in that same bill, Josh? They actually provided amnesty for tens of millions of illegal immigrants. So that bill went down in flames. It didn't pass. But that tells you a lot, right? It was Chucky Schumer, senator from New York, Democrat, communist, whatever. Then you had on the Republican side, Lady Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. So a bipartisan bill to legalize tens of millions of illegals and make sure everybody has a mandatory national biometric digital ID masquerading as a social slavery, social security card. So we know it's not about illegal immigration. The CBDCs are progressing very rapidly, right? The Bank for International Settlements, the World Economic Forum say almost every government in the world, almost every central bank in the world is rolling these out. If you look, for example, at the European Union, they're one of the furthest along. They're doing not just the CBDCs, they're doing the digital wallet, which includes your digital ID. It includes various documents like your certifications, your licenses. It includes, of course, your digital currency. So the EU is very, very far along. They've also introduced the European Union, they call the UVA-BECO, the European Union vaccine card that is part of this whole digital wallet. So the EU is really a pioneer in this. Communist China is really a pioneer in this as everything moves onto your smartphone and your biometric face print. And now I want to spend just a moment, Josh, on the international architecture, which is absolutely critical to making this whole thing work. So the Bank for International Settlements, call it the apex of the neo-feudalistic superstructure that they're trying to build here, has been working for several years now. And not theory. You can go to their website, you can read the white papers, you can listen to speeches. They've been working on the international component that's going to bring all of it together. They're calling it the International Blockchain Ledger. measure of this, they need to tokenize every asset in the known universe, every car, every house, every farm, every stock, every bond, all of it will become a digital token living forever on this international blockchain ledger that the BIS is working on with private companies and central banks. And to be able to exchange any of these tokenized assets, you're going to need to use your digital ID and your digital currency. So people haven't put the dots together. They haven't looked yet at all the puzzle pieces together, but all these different little puzzle pieces are coming together. And when they think that it is irreversible, when they think that there's no longer any way to back out, they're going to say, voila, all of it's together. Now you're stuck. Now you're trapped. Now you have no freedom and no privacy.
Right, and I feel like Alex, we're witnessing this both on the governmental side and the private side. You mentioned, through I guess with these stable coins that they're pushing through. Augustus Bank just got a conditional approval by the OCC a couple days ago, which would be an AI powered bank, and it's through a Peter Thiel protege that this was established. At the same time, we have Basel III 2 years ago, integrated in 63 central banks, which could involve bail-in regimes, which does very much relate to this situation. The United Nations Pact for the Future a month before that in 2024, allowing for a lot of restrictions on bank accounts digitally over what people say online and what people do. And of course, you mentioned 50 and 50, a very important or 50 and 5 rather, a very important point. At the same time, with Visa and MasterCard, you didn't need mandates for these things. They just became something that you could not escape in big cities. And so these are private corporations that are pushing this on people, just like Keir Starmer said, with his digital IDs. Well, don't worry, it won't be mandated and enforced on everyone. It's just that if you don't have it, you won't be able to take part in everyday life. You won't be able to transact. This is exactly the system that the World Economic Forum is rolling out. And of course, with that, I wanted to mention, we have AI being pushed by both sides extremely fast right now. I mean, Trump, one of the first things he did in office was this $500 billion AI plan, and then his move with the Saudis over AI governance and militarism. We also have Bill Gates and we have Sam Altman and we have Elon Musk all pushing this so-called fix-all for this problem. They say, well, in a few years, AI will destroy all employment. But don't worry, you'll have UBI, Universal Basic Income. I feel like this all comes together under one roof where we have banking controlled by this digital ID system. We have, of course, we have the issue with the Strait of Hormuz and all these other things. Food rations because of shortages that were created, manufactured, of course. And then we have, oh, well, you don't have a job and you can't afford anything. Here, sit at home. And it brings me back to a quote by Yuval Noah Harari some years ago where he said, I dream of a world where people are placated on drugs playing video games. This sounds like UBI to me. It's a World Economic Forum goal. Elon Musk says, oh, I'm on the right and I'm against the multiculturalism issue, which is, it's realistic to be against all that stuff. But then, like a Trojan horse, UBI, accept the carbon tax system, accept carbon credits. I feel like there's a big a construct coming, which is actually going to be based in the private sector to offset the legal issues of constitutional law, to get around the issues that government can't enforce certain things on people. The Genius Act, okay, great. But then we have on the side X money, which is attached to XAI, which is attached to the Pentagon. I feel like the private sector might be the number one issue here going forward with this push for digital IDs and AI governance.
Yeah, it's a fascistic partnership. There's no question about it. This is the biggest businesses in the world working with the biggest and most powerful governments in the world and the international institutions all coming together to impose this prison on all of us and really to crush any resistance, to crush any opposition. And people need to understand when they think about like the new money, right? Universal basic income, or now Elon Musk is going for universal high income. Oh, we're all going to be rich. Isn't that going to sit back and paint paintings at your house and drink tea and you'll be rich? They need to understand this isn't money in the traditional sense. This is programmable ration cards, right? That are based on some combination of energy credits or carbon credits that you will be allowed to use for certain purposes based on, for example, your social credit score as they've pioneered in China. This isn't money like we think of it. Like I can go to the store and buy whatever I feel like it as long as I have enough money. These are programmable currencies, and we have to get out of our mind the notion that this is money. They will determine what you get to spend it on, if you get to spend it, for how long you get to spend it, what are the criteria through which you can spend it. And they've been telling us this openly for years. So think back to like the Soviet Union. Yeah, everybody got free everything, right? You got ration cards for your groceries and for your tobacco and whatever, except they never had any, right?
Yeah.
This is worse than that because this can be updated through a computer program edit at any time by your overlords. And if they determine after having the AI process all of your emails and your text messages and the likes that you did on Facebook and whatever, that you are some sort of thought criminal, that you tithe at a Bible believing church or you support some libertarian politician or whatever, they can and they absolutely will limit what you can buy, potentially down to nothing. Right. So this is the kind of system they're building where non-compliance will become virtually impossible because you will not be able to operate unless you comply. Oh, you don't want your 27th COVID booster? Well, I guess you can't go to the grocery store and buy your basic needs. And so they're preparing right now. I see behind you, you've got Mr. Klaus Schwab's book on the Great Reset. They're preparing right now for what the World Economic Forum called the polycrisis. They are engineering this polycrisis. Don't let them convince you that this is somehow organic. This was a huge focus in the Pact for the Future. I was actually at UN headquarters when they adopted this atrocious document. And a big part of it is what do we do during emergencies? And surprise, the UN Secretary General gets to declare emergencies and he gets to have all power and authority during these declared emergencies. And so what they're preparing right now is some combination of financial, economic crisis, so they can bring in the great taking where they're going to steal all your stocks, all your bonds, all your financial assets. Some combination of maybe a public health scare, maybe some kind of alien UFO, oh, our gods have arrived, whatever. And maybe some war, maybe it's a civil war, maybe in combination with the Third World War, some combination of terrible, terrible things that will cause people to react very much like they reacted during COVID, right? Oh no, we're going to die, whatever the government says we need to do. And that's when the final pieces of the puzzle be put in place. Don't worry, citizens. You can get back to your regularly scheduled shopping. Just take your smartphone, download your little app. We're going to get you some CBDCs, and you can go get your groceries. So that's what they're planning for. Now, I don't believe their success is a foregone conclusion, but I know for a fact this is what they're working on as we speak. And if we don't get serious about stopping this and exposing it, it's not going to end well for anybody, including the megalomaniacs that are trying to prepare this for us.
Absolutely. And one thing you mentioned there, I always feel like this digital system comes upon via emergency orders, whatever they want. And it reminds me of a UN paper that came out quite a few years ago. I can't remember the exact title of it, saying specifically in the case of a pandemic or a civil war or a world war or a terrorist attack, or in the case of an economic calamity, a climate calamity, or an alien invasion. I remember those words specifically in those UN documents. We can enforce this international structure of control. Now, it brings me back as well to a statement by Paul Krugman several years ago that if we want to artificially prop up the economy, we could fake an alien invasion. And he said that alongside we should break windows. So, riots help the economy. This is obviously insane. But with that said, I take it seriously simultaneously because we have an issue right now that seems to be pointing in that direction. Of course, we have the pressure of a new pandemic, or we could potentially in World War III already when we don't know it, and all this. But alien invasions, we have this UFO and UAP disclosure movement, which of course is very interesting. They're about to release the second load of documents, I believe, in the next couple of days. They've released a lot of information. I wanted to hear your thoughts on this. With a lot of the imagery that we see coming out, it seems like it could be top secret, technology by the U.S. government and other governments around the world. It could be something metaphysical. It could be something demonic. Trump shared an image on Truth Social of him walking with an AI alien. And of course, we are living in a really crazy time when that's happening. I wanted to hear your thoughts. Is it a psyop? Is it like the Project Bluebeam kind of thing? Is it a demon disclosure? What do you think?
Well, there's a lot to unpack here, Josh. And yes, the UN has for years now been kind of preparing the way for this. In fact, about well, over a decade ago now, they appointed the first global ambassador for outer space affairs, right? The one who, when the aliens come and say, "Take me to your leader," right? I guess that's where they're supposed to go. And they kind of backtracked a little bit when everybody was making fun of them, but the sentiment is there. And you're right. Just a few years ago, the Secretary General put out a document, one of several, Our Common Future. This was policy proposal number 2, where they said in the event of a global emergency, which by the way doesn't have to be global and doesn't really have to be an emergency, the Secretary General can just declare them at will.
Exactly.
Then they specifically said in this document that all stakeholders, all entities, all governments, businesses, individuals, nonprofits, everybody would have to respect what it calls the primary decision-making authority of multilateral agencies. In other words, UN bureaucracies. And one of the scenarios they gave very openly was something arriving from outer space. So they've been preparing for this. The US government has been preparing for this. And it used to be seen as kind of like fringe and kooky, like, oh, you're one of those, like little green spacemen, whatever. Now we've got the President of the United States talking about it. We've got the Vice President of the United States talking about it. We've got the Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense talking about it. We've got top members of the military. I just saw a retired U.S. Admiral on Fox News talking about these beings that are supposedly here. We've got multiple members of Congress coming out talking about what they've been briefed on. Matt Gaetz actually said the government's running a breeding program where they're breeding human beings and these extraterrestrial life forms.
Oh, well,
Whatever that.
Alex, I apologize for interrupting here, but even Marco Rubio was on video a few days ago talking about how there's people that within the government that saw living beings from other planets, and if they spoke out about it, they were threatened that the government would kill them. I mean, these are pretty big statements coming from the Secretary of State.
They're huge, right? And like I know some of these guys. They're decent people, I think. At least in my experience, they have been. So I don't think these guys necessarily are consciously trying to mislead people. But what I do think, Josh, and now we're going from what's factual, what's provable, what people can read in the documents to my opinion. In my opinion, something is going on here. There's too many of these sightings to just be nothing. I think certainly some of them are classified defense projects. Whether from Operation Paperclip, where we brought over a bunch of real clever Nazi scientists, whether it's something the U.S. government developed, whatever. There's something there. And then I think there's a step beyond that. I believe, based on what we've seen, and actually the vice president said this recently in an interview, that he thinks what we're dealing with is demonic. And I tend to agree with that. I'm a Christian, of course. I believe the Bible, and the Bible talks about, yes, there's human beings, but there's also angels, there's fallen angels, there's demons, and the Bible doesn't dwell on these. I mean, we don't have tons of detail. We know that sometimes angels take human form. Paul even says sometimes you might entertain one being unaware that you're dealing with an angel. But there's clearly these other intelligent beings that God has created. Some of them are monstrously evil, some not. Some of them are still in God's service. And so I think there's people in the government who believe that they're talking to aliens. I think there are very smart people who think they're getting really clever ideas about technology, about weapons, about defense from these beings that they're talking to. And one of the things that becomes to me really suspicious is that these supposed extraterrestrial beings are flying here or whatever from light years away to tell us that, well, Jesus isn't really who you thought he was, right? We're going to tell you, Jesus is actually one of us. And there was a secret pastor meeting recently. We've got at least 4 or 5 pastors who've come out publicly now and revealed different elements of this. They said they were summoned to a meeting with top-ranking government officials and told that they need to prepare their congregation. Like 2/3 of Americans still identify as Christians. So this is the vast majority of the American population. And one of these pastors said something insane. He said that he was told that these beings are actually our creators. In other words, they are our gods, that they came here, who knows how many thousands of years ago, and seeded life on this planet. So I think the forces of evil are preparing for the most monstrous great deception maybe in the history of humanity. I don't know what the details will look like, but one thing I know for sure, Josh, is you cannot trust the government ever, anywhere. They're lying until proven otherwise. So if the government tells you that they're, aliens who seeded life on this planet, they're lying until proven otherwise. If the government tells you they're good aliens, they're lying until proven otherwise. If the government tells you they're bad aliens, they're lying until proven otherwise. So whatever you do, don't believe the media, don't believe the government, and use your common sense.
Well, Alex, I really want to ask about something here with in regards to this subject matter, which is, we've seen things by drawings by Aleister Crowley years ago of the Aiwass or Lamb, which is basically what they based the gray alien on. It was this
Yep.
demon. And of course, I've done a lot of research in that. I've unfortunately seen some things that I'm not going to talk about on camera because they'll look crazy. But when I've been investigating, things like the Great Pyramids and stuff, I've seen some things. And anyway, the point is, this leads me down this rabbit hole of where the aliens are coming from. I actually know a guy years ago who told me also when he was about 18 years old, he did LSD and he with his friend, and both of them saw this thing walk in, and they said it looked like an alien, but it was talking as though it was a demon, and they both saw it at the same time. And I'm a believer, and I believe that these things are happening here on Earth in this realm, and I feel like with everything that's happening in the world right now, the shift we are witnessing, it's not just historic, it's biblically historical. And I want to ask your opinion as from like the Christian perspective of where do you see this going biblically when we're getting all these disclosures and we could be dealing with demonic forces? What could we be seeing? Could we be seeing that revelation play out? Can we see the book of Revelation playing out right now? It sounds like a big jump, but with everything that's happening, it's hard to resist the idea that we could be in that scenario right now with everything that seems to be happening on Earth right now.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Josh, and I think everybody needs to spend some time thinking about this, regardless of where you're at. If you're an atheist, if you're an agnostic, if you're a Christian, if you're a Buddhist, if you're a Muslim, everybody needs to be spending some time thinking about this right now. And the Book of Revelation is a very important text. I mean, it's 2,000 years old. And 2,000 years ago, some of the things that are discussed in there must have sounded absolutely preposterous, right? The idea that there's going to be some global tyrannical system that's going to be able to prevent every person on the planet from buying or selling unless they take a mark. I mean, John would have been laughed out of any room if he had said something like that in front of people. Like, what do you mean? Every single person on the planet? Like, what kind of totalitarian system could
And
do
by the
that?
way,
Well,
imagine thinking it's a coincidence that all that was written all that time ago and it's worked out exactly that way to this day. I mean,
right.
how would they have known what this system would be back then? That's the thing.
That's right. And I think when you read it, like a lot of it sounds like, well, that's kind of weird because John didn't have words to explain things that were happening 2,000 years in the future. The guy lived 2,000 years ago, right? They were using donkeys to get around. So, seeing like modern military attack gear like that would have sounded pretty weird. So there's a lot in the book of Revelation. And there's a lot in the scriptures that speak about this. And I would say most churches don't do an adequate job of talking about this because it's hard, because it's complicated, because it's controversial. But like, Genesis 6, I mean, if we go all the way back to the very beginning of the Bible, we have this very strange text that talks about the sons of God, which almost certainly refers to some sort of angelic being. Every other reference in the Old Testament to sons of God, we're talking about some sort of angelic being mating, creating babies with the daughters of men. And the Bible says the product of this union was something called Nephilim, which is described as a giant. It's just a brief reference. There's not a whole lot of additional information in the scriptures. There are other extra biblical texts, apocryphal texts that kind of expand on this, things like the book of Enoch, which, I don't necessarily regard as canon, but it's quoted in Jude in the New Testament. I mean, there's good reason to read it, whether you consider it inspired by the Holy Spirit or not. These are important things. And again, most churches aren't dealing with this. You read the book of Daniel and you have these incredible prophecies about future empires. I mean, all come true. It's fascinating. And so when you look at what's happening now, and you read some of the prophecies even that some of the other New Testament writers wrote about how toward the end it's going to be like in the days of Noah, right? Well, one of the things that was happening during the days of Noah was this thing that I just talked about in Genesis chapter 6 with the creation of these strange beings, the product of angelic beings mating with human women. So I don't pretend to know what all of this means. I always tell people the more I study this, the more I have to admit I don't know. And I think anybody who doesn't approach these subjects with a profound sense of humility and a profound sense of our own inadequacy is doing a disservice to themselves and others because this stuff is complicated. And I don't think we're going to know exactly what all these things mean until they're in the rearview mirror. But I think people would be utterly foolish not to look at the Bible, the most widely read book in the most influential book in the history of the world, a book for which more people have died than all the other books in the world combined, right? And normally they don't kill you about comic books. Normally they don't kill you about IKEA catalogs, right? What is it about the Bible that so many evildoers have decided you have to die for this book? I would encourage people to read it. I would encourage people to be in prayer. I would encourage people to get right with God while we still have time, because I don't know what's coming, but the prophecies that are outlined in the scripture will come to pass, and you don't want to be on the wrong side when all that hits.
We're seeing so many things that are akin to what we saw with the Tower of Babel right now, and
Yep.
the idea of in this AI digital future, we'll all be speaking the same language. The hubris and the arrogance usually crushes those that build that tower, and of course, it'll reset everything. And that's interesting when we hear things like the Great Reset. We've seen resets before. Of course, the mark of the beast. If anything is a mark of the beast, it's what we're dealing with right now with the digital ID, social credit, 15-minute city situation that, of course, is a direct attack on humanity itself. If people say, oh, it's a war between religions, it's between countries, it's between races, the war is on humanity as it is. And I think it's important that we get right and we prepare ourselves. Alex, you're one of the best journalists out there, and I really, really appreciate and respect your work over these many years that I've known you. And I wanted to let you know, because you're a very busy man. I want you to let my viewers rather know about some of the things you're working on and where they could find you, because you do so many different shows, and it's hard to find exactly the pinpoint, because you got all these books, you got all these shows, you got all these articles on all these different platforms. Can you let people know where they could find you?
Well, thanks so much, Josh. The feeling is mutual. Really grateful for the work you are doing and have been doing for so many years. My personal website is libertysentinel.org. Sentinel is Sentinel. It's like a watchman, a soldier. People can get our free newsletter there. I'm senior editor at the New American Magazine. We actually just did a new special issue where we get into some of the very topics that we discussed today. I've got one in here about the war on God and true religion that I think people will find interesting. It goes through a lot of this. I got a book that I just released a couple months ago with my friend Robert Bortons. You mentioned it at the start, Woke and Weaponized, how Karl Marx won the battle for American education and how we can take it back. I regard this as a key battlefront, right? They're capturing the hearts and minds of our children. So, I would encourage people to get informed on this, especially if you have children in your life, your own or grandchildren or whatever. I've got my own children enrolled in Classical Conversations. Robert, my co-author, is the CEO there. It's just a great, great program. And, there are very few things that I think are more important than making sure our children get a real education. So I would encourage people to check out all that. And then the New American Magazine, I serve as senior editor there. People can get the free daily headlines, or they can even subscribe to the print magazine. And I do my show that you mentioned, Josh. The Sentinel Report is available on our website, Behind the Deep State. And I have a new book coming out within the next few weeks here called Deep State 2.0, where we're going to be getting into a lot of these topics, including all the digital ID, digital brain that these people are working on. And again, thank you for having me on the program, Josh. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. And keep up the good work. I hope we can talk soon.
I appreciate it, Alex. And I can say from experience, meeting a few of your kids, they are incredibly intelligent. You're definitely living by example, and you should definitely be proud. All those links, my friends, everyone that's watching, those links are in the description of the video. Make sure to check those out and hit that like button to get around that algorithm. I appreciate it, Alex. And hopefully we catch up, not in 9 years, but more soon than that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Josh.
Make sure to check that link in the description for WaveWatch 2.2, where you can get over $100 off if you use code WAM, W-A-M. Amazing detoxing technology, 1,250 frequencies on your wrist. And, of course, no Wi-Fi needed, no Bluetooth, no EMFs. It helps you soothe your nerves, boost energy, enhance cellular function, and improve sleep. It's endorsed by people like Dr. Brian Ardis and Dr. Motley. I urge people to go and check that out in the description. WaveWatch 2.2. Use code WAM, W-A-M, and you'll save over $100. There's a bunch of other options in the description as well. And make sure, as always, to hit that like button, share on social media, hit the notification bell, and hit subscribe if you have not yet already. And find us especially on Rumble and BitChute at World Alternative Media. All right, everyone. We appreciate you watching. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth. Be the change.